Oh no, I know what to do.
Firm built by women.
We will be starting in 3, 2, 1 now.
Capital firm built by women of color for women of color, and was founded by Queen Wa Area Simone to transform how women entrepreneurs across the world access capital. Since the launch of Fearless Fund, it has invested over $27 million in over 40 women-led businesses all across Africa and beyond. But that's not all. It's also supported founders across the continent and beyond with funding, mentorship, and leadership development. The good news here is that Fearless Fund is extending its mission to Ghana with the launch of the Fearless Microfinance Fund.
All right. Welcome to This Week in Ghana, your bi-weekly live stream where we talk about all things Ghana news, investments, moving, visiting, and real estate in the country of Ghana. Before we get into today's stories around Fearless Fund Africa launch and the 6-month rent update, as well as others, we'd like to do some introductions. So I'll turn it over for our co-host introduction before I introduce myself.
Hello, my name is Ivy Prosper, and I am the founder of Prosper Creative Group, as well as a YouTube creator. And I enjoy doing these bi-weekly live streams with my fellow colleague, Joe Hatagwa. And I'm excited about the conversations we're going to have today, because it's very important if you are in the diaspora and you're considering living in Ghana to also understand the news and politics and business that's happening on the ground in the African continent. So we're doing our best to have these conversations and tying it into why it's relevant for you to know the news in Ghana. You can follow me on my platforms, all of my platforms. It's Ivy Prosper on all platforms. And then you can always reach me via email if you need to contact me at info@ivyprosper.com.
Absolutely. And I am Joe Hatagwa, founder of Authentic African. Our goal is to help you do one of 3 things, or potentially multiple things: visit, move, and invest on the continent of Africa, investing in real estate, investing in business, starting a business. Our goal is to make sure you are aware of what's available to you, the tools, the resources, so that you can make informed decisions. We also do these live streams where we talk about the news of the day to make sure you're aware of the countries that you might potentially be interested in moving to. So we have this live stream we do every other Monday. I also do interviews with folks from time to time on live stream formats for diasporans who have businesses on the continent. And then I also do a weekly Africa general focused live stream of news. And then from time to time, we do have a Sierra Leone specific live stream that we do with a couple of other folks as well. So our goal is to make sure that you are aware before you make any decisions. Okay, so with that, let's get into today's stories. As you saw in the intro, Fearless Fund, who won a landmark case in the Supreme Court last year, actually launched, and this in the US, based on the rescinding of what was at one point called affirmative action. Now has different names, goes by different names, and it's been bastardized and negatively described as DEI, etc. But they actually won the case and are able to continue to operate their business of funding and investing in businesses. One of the businesses that they invested in early on that you guys might be familiar with, because they've been in a lot of news around the States, is Slutty Vegan, which is a very, very tasty vegan restaurant that makes food that doesn't feel vegan, but is vegan. And it was women owned and led. There's many stories around it right now, but the point is they were an early stage investor way back when. So Arian has been in Ghana a couple of different times. I saw her there in December She was there, and she was also there a year or so ago and did some interviews about her thoughts on the continent. So we'll get into that in a bit. But first, I thought we'd play a video from Joy News, which covered the launch, and then also spoke a little bit to the underrepresentation and the need for something like Fearless Fund in Ghana. So I will put this video on the screen, and then we will come back with some commentary on the other side.
Women weekly 46.4% of businesses. That's almost half of all businesses, one of the highest rates in the world. Yet, despite this strong presence, many continue to face limited access to funding to expand their enterprises. Fearless Fund and its partners are seeking to bridge this gap by unlocking access to capital for women-led businesses and driving inclusive economic growth across the continent. The winner of the 100,000 Ghana cedis, Khadijat El Alawa, CEO of Share Go Juice, expressed how the funding would help scale her operations and expand her reach.
And it's such an honor to have been picked as the winner. With this win, we are going to be able to more than triple our sales and revenue and be able to touch a lot of people in Ghana.
At the event, CEO of the organization, Ariana Simon, emphasized the urgent need to invest deliberately in women entrepreneurs.
In Ghana, nearly half the businesses alone are owned by women.
So, and then there is a little bit more of another video, but maybe we can share the rest of the original video, which spoke a little bit more to the full amount of potential funding that was going to be available. So we'll play a little bit of that, and then we'll give a little bit more feedback on that before we play some of the keynote that came from Ariane herself.
This new fund is focused on women entrepreneurs in fast-moving consumer goods, including production, trading, distribution, and packaging, to enable them scale through access to capital. As part of its launch, Fearless Fund is hosting a pitch competition here in Accra, and you as a woman entrepreneur could pitch to win 100,000 Ghana cedis.
All right, so obviously that video was done before the event itself, and clearly the event has now happened, and the 100,000 Ghana cedi winner was announced, as you just heard in the prior video. So your thoughts, Ivy, on the launch of Fearless Fund Africa and the focus on women entrepreneurs?
I think it's fantastic. It's an opportunity for women on the continent to get access to funds for their businesses, because I think that is one of the biggest challenges that people have when they are in the continent of Africa, is getting access to these types of things. Yep. A lot of pitch competitions, a lot of grants, a lot of different things are usually accessible to women in countries like the US or Canada or places in Europe. You hear a lot about different funds that are available, but I know that on the African continent, oftentimes there's conversations about not many opportunities for things like this. So it's really good that this is being offered. And then in Ghana, we know it's a country that has so many women who are entrepreneurs. Many of the businesses are run by women. So this is a really a great way to put a spotlight on what women are doing, and then to give someone an opportunity to get something that will help fund the growth and scaling up of her business. So congratulations to the winner, because it's definitely going to be something to help her grow her business and take it to the next level.
Absolutely. And I'll just add to that, you know, although there are more opportunities in the West, it's still underfunded. So just imagine how much more underfunded we have it on the continent. Generally, there's not enough funding for the other half of the businesses that are owned and started by men. So imagine how much underfunding happens for women on the continent. And I will say, I know 2 different women in Sierra Leone who've recently taken out business loans, with one with a micro lender and another with a bank. And those bank loan terms are difficult. I happen to know someone who has a microloan business, and you have to have a cosigner that is going to guarantee that they will pay the loan in full by the end of the term, right? And so if the person who takes out the loan does not take the loan or does not pay back the loan, the guarantor has to pay the loan in full. And there's an asset that they have to turn over for the length of that loan. So if that's a vehicle or something to that effect, they actually have to turn over the actual asset itself to the people loaning, and that just ensures that the loan gets paid back to the person loaning. And that's generally what microloans. Bank loans, they don't necessarily take over the asset for that time period, but they have the right to collect that asset. And the rates on those loans are high, 20% or higher. Very, very high loan rates and percentages, and the time frames are short. So the microloans, 1 to 2 months. Loans with banks within a year, less than a year. That is just how it works. And so loans are not really optimal for many people. They end up being in more debt than they were before they took the loan. So ideally having viable businesses that just require a little bit more cash up front, because as you guys may or may not know, having a business on the continent in many countries is not just the business itself in terms of the overhead and the rental costs, but many times you need backup light and power, right? So you need to have a generator, which means you have to pay for fuel, right? And you know, fuel prices have gone way up due to existential processes and problems around the world. You have to sometimes, depending on their business, back up water. You know, I went and interviewed someone who had a water plant, and they had 2 separate repositories of water, and they had solar and 2 giant generators as a backup and a backup to a backup, because they wanted to ensure that their factory was going 24/7 and they could continue to pump out that bottled water. Without that, then obviously they'd have too much downtime. And those are contingencies he had to put in place. So he, as a functioning business, multi-generational business, had to go out and get grants so that he could secure that upfront capital and then slowly work to make that money back. And so taking a loan, it's very difficult to kind of pay those loans back in that short amount of time, because a lot of times these folks are doing business with local people. And if the average income in Ghana is right around $75 a month, the last time I checked, Sierra Leone is right around $55 a month. You know, you obviously understand that the prices that you can charge for goods or service to that end customer is not going to be the same that you can do in the West. And so that means your rate of return is going to be much lower, or at least your margins are going to be thinner. So you have to take that into account. You're going to have to do larger quantities of sales, which means you're going to have some upfront capital. There's a lot there. I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
No, you've said it all. I mean, it seems like sometimes some of these things are even set up for people to fail even. And I see that one of the comments there says that the same thing that I was thinking, that, you know, because if you're given a loan and it's a high interest rate, it is setting you up for failure, because how are you going to be able to pay something at such a high rate when you're a small business who's really trying to make it?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting too about what they're doing here is it wasn't just one winner. I mean, there were obviously multiple winners, but other people got some version of a grant, something that they could walk out of there with that they could utilize for their business, which I thought was really important. So we're going to hear from Ariane a little bit because I think it's important to hear from her and her thought process around why she's doing this. I mentioned her before on this live stream previously, and I've posted when she won the landmark case with the Supreme Court. It was a big deal here in the United States, considering the Supreme Court case in the first place, many of us disagreed with anyway. So the fact that this landmark case was won was a big win. So let's go ahead and play a little bit from her so you can hear from her herself, and then we'll have a little bit more commentary before we move on to the next story. Okay.
These are very meaningful contributions which cannot be overlooked, because women are the heartbeat of every African nation. Women produce nearly 40% of the continent's agricultural output. They dominate our markets. They power our informal sectors. They carry the communities on their backs. Despite their tenacity, Despite their proven track record, despite their talent, women entrepreneurs across Africa remain locked out of opportunity. They face a huge financing gap estimated by some at 42 billion US dollars. Only 7% of African women receive venture capital funding. So let me say this plainly. Instead of seeing our women as high risk, we at the Fearless Fund see African women as high return. Today, we are launching a new fund in Ghana built to deliver innovative and culturally responsive financial services to women who have been underestimated and under-resourced for far too long.
Speaking on behalf of the Deputy Chief of Staff, Nana Oyebampo Adu, the Director of Research and Innovation at the Presidency, highlighted the importance of strong partnerships in closing the financial gap and empowering women entrepreneurs in Ghana.
Yeah, so I mean, you heard from her directly there, just kind of speaking more to the reasons for why she launched this fund. Obviously, it's always been female-led, female-focused, and I'll just mention that, again, Khadija Talawa, sorry. That was a tough one. She's CEO and co-founder of Cheer Natives and Cheer Up Beverages, won 100,000 Ghana CDs, which is basically about what, like $10,000 or so, right? If
That's
I'm,
right.
If I'm mistaken. Yeah. So, which is really helpful for a local entrepreneur. Obviously, this is more of, if I'm not mistaken, kind of a grant. But there will be investments, meaning that when Fearless Fund, obviously they launched the fund, which means that they're launched the idea of raising a fund, right? Raising money, having capital sitting somewhere, and then they divest that capital into different businesses. And ideally, eventually, the plan will be to invest in those businesses and take a percentage of those businesses to help to accelerate those businesses. Any other thoughts on what she had to say, or anything from since the last video?
You could share some of the comments in the comment section. Let the audience thoughts come and be part of the conversation.
Yeah, so Maureen says it makes it really difficult for Africans from the diaspora to help. We really do want to help, but can't afford to be scammed. It's a catch-22. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that it's very difficult to understand who and how to invest in any businesses on the continent, right? There are many horror stories that we have all heard, but then again, there are many stories that we have all seen from other folks who have come to the continent and have invested in different ways, whether that's starting their own businesses or investing in other businesses. There are many people who are nationalities from other parts of the world, mostly Asia, and that's either East Asia or West Asia, which some people call the Middle East, but many of them are around the continent, specifically in Ghana. Some of the major businesses that you might see there, you might think are Ghanaian owned. Many times they can be owned by Lebanese or Chinese or Indian folks, same in Sierra Leone and other parts of West Africa. But there are viable Ghanaian businesses. And I think that one of the things that a fund like this can do, depending on if you have that kind of funding and financing, right? If you have that kind of cash, the Fearless Fund will help folks do the vetting on their behalf, right? They, of course, do their own due diligence before they invest a fund's money into a business. They've been doing that in the States. They're now applying similar practices in partnership with other folks locally on the ground to do the same thing in country. I think it's really important, though, to understand that any emerging market is a high risk, high reward market, right? The people who invested in OPay and Della were probably also told that there are too many scams in Africa. And those businesses are what they call unicorns, meaning $100 million businesses, billion-dollar businesses. But they've done so well that they've had major exits, and those who invested in those businesses do not regret it. And so I do think it's important to know that it's about due diligence. It's understanding who you're investing in, what sectors you invest in, what you know. Investing involves risks, right? That's just like you know, when you hear these commercials like from Robinhood and these other commercials for, you know, stock market investing, right? There's always that disclaimer at the end. Investment involves risk. This is not a guarantee for a return on investment. So it is not for the weary. It is for the wise. That is what I would say. Any thoughts on that particular comment?
I think that there's many ways that you can invest in Ghana, besides saying that you're going to just invest in a specific person. I just recently did a video that is on my channel that is titled "How to Buy a Business in Ghana," and that one is another way that you can invest your money and start a business in Ghana without you actually having to start it from scratch. They actually list businesses that are selling, people who want to exit. You know, you always hear about people who have a company, they've been working there for so many years, maybe they want to retire and they want to exit, they want to sell it. So this company does that. People can buy the business, and then now you have a business you didn't have to start from scratch. It might already be operating well, and it's just somebody who wants to exit the market. So that's another way you can look at investing in Ghana without having to start from scratch. And this company also, they vet every business that they're selling. They do so many checks and balances to make sure that it is a legal operation, to make sure that it is, you know, doing what they're supposed to do, and that it has the possibility of you making a good business out of it. So if you go to my channel and find the video that's called "How to Buy a Business in Ghana," that's another alternative that you can look at.
Yeah, it was a great video, by the way. I watched that interview this weekend, and I found it to really useful because I had never even thought about that concept and anybody doing it. And those two gentlemen had worked for other institutions that is what they did. And for a while, they worked for an arm of that business on the continent. And then they broke out into their own business to do it themselves, which I think is really important. And then they also partner with international institutions to ensure that there's a level of framework and a process to that everyone can be comfortable with. So to your point, that is one way for sure. And I really like that idea because there are many people who are not passing on their businesses to their children. You know, no matter where you are in the world, people who have these businesses, as they age out, their children do not want to run that business.
Yeah.
You find that a lot. And so there are people right now on the continent who've made a significant amount of money in those businesses, but they're ready to move on. They're ready to take a cash payout and just relax,
retire and
retire. And so if there's no one to give the business over to, that leaves a gap in the market for those who need that. It's the same way that people in the United States right now are buying like plumbing businesses and HVAC businesses. Similar style businesses are available for purchase on the continent. So these are things that you should definitely be considering and thinking about. So Minnie Brown says, yay, Fearless Fun. Black Butterfly says, can someone create an African-American app to round up change for Africa and investments? I guess it's like you're asking for like one place for all of it. Yeah, I think that there are different places that you can go. But there will be soon repositories where you can find lists of businesses. There are people working on it as we speak. These are all things in development, and you know, it's going to take some time for those things to be built. But once I have more insight and information on that, I'll definitely share it. But I've been speaking to people who are working with governments who have all the registered businesses. Now you're going to be missing out on market women and the unbanked, but people who have registered their businesses with governments, those will be able to be found eventually. So one thing that I thought was interesting is Mr. Alkebulan says that don't need Fearless Fund. We have the African Development Bank Group. Yeah, I would say my initial thought to this is there is not one solution to everything, right? There is a need for sure. I mean, it's clearly shown in this interview, right? 7% of businesses that get investment on the continent go to women, when in many countries, 40% or many even more of the businesses are owned by women. So that clearly shows that there's a gap. So the one potential solution here with the Africa Development Bank Group is not necessarily filling that gap completely. So, but it's good to know that there are other options available. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this particular comment.
No, I don't have. You said it already.
Okay, cool.
We have a comment that I see about One Africa. I have an answer to that question.
This
So
one
One
here.
Africa, that resort, the woman who owns it, Amicus, she had left Ghana for Rwanda and put it up for sale. But I see she's back in Ghana now, and she's trying to raise money to save it. So I don't know if she still wants to sell it now, or if she's trying to now come back and work on rebuilding it. Because I saw her on social media in a video where she was asking for funds. I think she put I don't know if she put a cash app or something to try to raise money to save it because it's falling apart. But that is a great question.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think if I remember correctly, it was done originally done in partnership or something like that, and then something happened with that arrangement, and then they built another version of it elsewhere. I think if this is the same company,
really,
and maybe it's not the same one, but this was a resort style hotel
in
style
Elmina.
thing?
It's in Elmina. It's beside Mabel's Table in Elmina, and it's a eco resort lodge type of place.
Yeah.
And she and her husband built it a long time ago. I can't remember exactly when, but more than 20 years ago, I believe. And she decided to move to Rwanda, and then had somebody else running it. And it subsequently has fallen apart. And I know that there was an attempt to sell it. And now I'm hearing from the video I saw that she's trying to raise money to save it.
Yes. And I think I was thinking of something else. So something similar happened, and this actually was even in a different country. It was a different West African country. But yeah, it looks like yes. So it looks like that's the latest update, is that someone's working on it. They're working on saving it. Sorry. Okay. So all right. So moving on to the next story. So from Fearless Fund to 6-month rent laws in Ghana. So we've spoken about this previously on this live stream, about the nature of the rent charges in Ghana and how difficult it was, right? I mentioned that I paid my rent a year in advance at first. I was able to negotiate down to do 6 months, and then negotiate down to 3 months, because it's always easier to negotiate with a current tenant than with a new tenant,
right?
And to find a
so
new
you
tenant.
were able to negotiate down because you were already a current tenant, not a new one.
Exactly. So because I was a current tenant, they agreed to reduce the payments down to every 3 months eventually, but it still was untenable, because they were like, we can't do anything less than that. Like, we're not going to do month to month. And it was fair, because I was told by a real estate agent while I was looking for apartments that the max was 6 months. But every single apartment I looked at, and Ivy and I spoken about this, I've been to at least 30, maybe even 40 apartments. If you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see that in one video, I might do 4 tours of apartments. Every single landlord I spoke to, or property manager, or owner, they all said the same thing: 1 year minimum. 1 year minimum. And they were not budging on that. And I was like, I'm pretty sure the law says 6 months. And they said, well, if you won't do it, someone else will rent it. That's what I heard on many occasions. So we are going to play a little bit from this video, because it is on Ivy's channel. If you want the full video, you can go there and watch it. But she actually speaks to this announcement. And then we're going to hear a little bit from the president of Ghana, H.E. MAHAMA. And we will then have some more commentary on the other side. So let me get to that now. There we go.
So here's a clip that comes from GH1, and where MAHAMA addresses this issue.
And so let me take housing and sanitation. Housing is a major problem. And for households, it is consuming the income of households. We need to have a national housing dialogue and decide how, between the private sector, government, and labor, we can come together and come out with a social housing policy to make sure that we provide affordable housing for workers to purchase on mortgage or to be able to rent at a favorable cost. The reason why private house owners are taking advantage is because of the deficit in housing. And so we have the rent courts. We say don't take more than 6 months of advance, what do you call it, rent advance. But the one who is renting and the house owner are both not prepared to go to the rent court because they are doing it quietly. He says pay 2 years rent advance. You can go and report him at the rent court and we'll hold that landlord accountable. But the one who is being asked 2 years rent advance doesn't want to go to the court. He will go and pay the landlord because he wants a place to lay his head. And so it is because we have a housing shortfall. And that is what is making them take advantage.
And I will just add an affordable housing shortfall, I will say, because there is plenty of housing.
Yeah, there's plenty. Yeah.
There's plenty of housing. But affordable housing shortfall, I think, is an important distinction there.
Yeah.
But your thoughts on this change? I mean, this is an interesting one. And he says to report them. That was a part of his message. You can watch the full video on Ivy's channel, but that's part of the message is he was saying to report those landlords. But your thoughts on this change?
Yeah, I mean, this should have been done a long time ago. The interesting thing is during the pandemic, they said they were going to enforce it under the last government. I remember the person who was in charge of the housing authority had come out publicly and said that they need to start enforcing the 6-month rent rule, but nothing actually happened. And the onus is on the people who are renting to do the reporting. But as he said, people don't go and do the reporting largely because they know that if they go and report, that landlord is probably going to find someone else to take the place, and then they lose the place that they wanted. So it's like this fear of losing out on somewhere that they can rent. But if everybody started reporting, the change would happen. And my understanding is that they have enforced it now that as of April 1st of this year, the government is supposed to be strict on enforcing when people report a landlord to enforce them getting fined. They can be fined, I think it's 1,200 Ghana cedis, which is $120, or they can also potentially face 6 months in prison if they don't follow the law when people report them. So if people don't report, nothing's gonna happen. That's what I think could potentially happen. Is it could be all conversation and discussions, and then nothing happens if nobody's reporting it. The other thing I'll say is one of the reasons why this has even started in the first place, from what I've heard in the past, is that in Ghana, landlords started taking more rent because people weren't paying. It's just like how you hear stories in the US or in Canada where a tenant is living somewhere and then they're not paying and they keep living there, they're not paying. And then next thing you know, the landlord is taking them to court, trying to get their funds or trying to evict them. And then the tenant knows their rights, and then they find all these loopholes that they don't get kicked out. And then someone's living there basically for free. So what I understand is in Ghana, that was happening, decades ago, where people were just taking advantage and not paying. And then next thing you know, the landlord has like all this debt that's not being paid, and the person is still living there. And then it's hard to evict them. And so my understanding is they started taking this whole year up front because they wanted to make sure that they got their money and didn't have to stress every month to try to get their payments. That's what I hear from the past, and has now become standard practice. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. The squatters' rights, right? You hear a lot about that with all around the world, and it is no different on the continent. And what I find too is the more inexpensive the rent, the longer the time frame I tend to find. So like people who, are looking to rent for with the equivalent of maybe $150 a month are asked to pay 2 years up front. But if they are scrounging up enough money to be able to afford $130 a month, then charging 2 years up front just really doesn't make sense economically for people. And I can see, and I see it all the time in Ghana, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, because I talk to people frequently in each of those countries. When you have to pay that much time up front, there's always a time of year that's super stressful.
Yeah.
When that rent bill comes due,
yeah,
it is the most stressful time because you're thinking about it in full 12 months. And I experienced it. And I will tell you, it is stressful because I was paying $600 a month in rent. So you could do the math on what 6 months looks like and what a year looks like up front. And I forgot to mention that in our interview, Ivy, but that 25K that I came to Ghana with, that was part of why I went so quickly.
Yeah,
I
and that's
pay
what I
a
say
year
to
up
people
front.
when people make comments. People are like, he was living frivolously. Oh, he was doing this. And I'm responding to comments saying most of that went to rent immediately, like right away, the rent, and then it takes out a huge chunk.
Yep. Yeah. So when I went to look at the apartment, and it was still early on in my apartment searches, I was unaware, and it was on me, that it was going to be a year up front, right? So when I was told that it was $600 per month by the realtor, it wasn't until it was time to sit down to sign the lease, maybe the day of or the day before, that I realized it was going to have to be a year up front. And so, I had maybe 20,000 at that time left in the bank, and like around, I think right around 7,500 is, what is that, 7,500 or so is I think is $600 a month for the year, something like that. So it takes a chunk, and then of course, then next you pay it again. So it really hits you hard, to pay that much, and especially if and the plans that I had for the place just weren't working out, which is why I was paying $600 per month for rent, because I probably should have paid more like $300 per month. But in any case, yes, it is very, very difficult for people to live under those circumstances. But on the flip side, as a homeowner, and as someone who is a co-owner of a property elsewhere, and understanding what it takes to have someone pay rent there, most places, which they should be, are going to take the side of the person that's renting, not the landlord, right? Most places give more rights to the renter than the landlord, which it should be that way. I think what that does, though, is someone who's an investor, right? Those of you who are thinking about investing, I think a lot of people who invest in property on the continent, or especially in West Africa, I'll say specifically, where we see these year-long or 2-year-long lease terms. I can't really speak for other parts of the continent as much. They find that to be an attractive thing, right? That's part of what people will sell you on when you're buying a property, right? Like, look, are you buying this for income property? If you are, just remember, you get a year up front in rental, or sometimes 2 years up front. And that's just kind of the standard practice. So this is something that you have to consider if you plan to be a landlord in country, that you'll no longer be able to, or you can try it, but somebody could potentially report you for extending it beyond the 6 months. And so you just have to ensure that you start to prep that tenant a month in advance to get ready to pay that rent. Are you ready to pay? Because you may also want to consider looking for a new tenant, because that is something that I have seen is those folks who there's a gap in tenancy, right? There's always a gap in tenancy when you own a property, right? Even if people are paying month to month, you always, you do first and last month and security deposit, depending on the place. But especially on the continent, what you'll find is people may be planning their move out, right, as a tenant, because they know they're not going to be able to make that next rent payment, and you are not planning for someone else to move in right after they leave. So as a landlord, those are things you're going to have to take into consideration. And there are many people who do this remotely, and they work with realtors and have them kind of manage it and manage the process. I would say of the 40 or so potential apartments that I looked at, more than half of them were people who were abroad, or at the very least did not even live inside the compound where the property is located, for sure. At the very least, they don't live there. Most of these people had income properties, and it was always fascinating to me how long it took them to build these houses and how much it cost. And it always feels like folks are utilizing those upfront rent payments to help recover some of the costs out of pocket, because it does take a long time to make your money back. For example, generally, it's hard to say how much it costs to build each floor, but let's say you put in $50,000 per floor and you have a 2-story apartment or 3-story apartment building with 2 apartments on each floor, or 1 apartment on each floor, which you can just double that if you want. But just think about those numbers: 50,000, 60,000 per floor. You do 2 floors, 3 floors. How long do you think it'll take you back charging monthly rent to make that money back? I mean, And that's, I think, what some people's eye is on, right? When they start charging these rental amounts, is just trying to feel like I spent $150,000 building this house, or $250,000 building this house. I want to try to make as much of that back as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And so you lose out on that with the now enforcing the potential enforcement of these 6 months. So you know, there's two sides to it, and we just want to make sure that those of you who are thinking about moving to Ghana and renting, those things are things to keep in mind. And those of you who are thinking about buying and investing in real estate, those are things to think about.
Definitely.
All right. Okay, so moving on to the, yes, generational wealth, for sure. It happens in real estate all the time. The largest transfer of wealth has been from younger people to older people in America right now, with these people who had bought houses 25, 35 years ago and selling those houses now. In the neighborhood that I'm in right now in New York, houses here were at one point in time $200,000 25 years ago. They are now $1.5 million right now. So it's very difficult to get in now and have that kind of increase in value in property. But you know where you can go to have that kind of percentage increase in the value of your property is on the continent of Africa. It's going to be smaller numbers in many cases, but that is what's happening on the continent right now. And of course, if you expect to hold on to something, because these are investments, this mentioned here is generational wealth, 15, 20, 25 years, 30 years, just imagine what that is going to be worth at that point in time. I'm already looking at a property that I had family members who had told me that they had acquired some property and they've paid about $2,000 an acre for like 15 acres. And now that land is worth like $10,000 per acre. So they've gone from 2,000 to 10,000 per acre in the value. And that's in 10 years or 11 years.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's the kind of return that some people are seeing. Obviously, it varies by country. It varies by municipality and locality. But these are the things that people are seeing. So that is why real estate is such a huge topic right now. And so many people are asking us about those things when it comes to the continent. Which is why I wanted to cover this story. All right. Moving on to the next story. So Ghana is accelerating its push for resource nationalism by reclaiming control of, is it the Damang gold mine in the western region, which was operated by South Africa's gold fields for 30 years. The government seized the mine in April last year after rejecting a lease renewal, citing failure to declare verifiable reserves. So now 3 local bidders are being considered, with MAHAMA's engineers, planners firm is the front runner. So Ibrahim MAHAMA, his engineers and planners firm is the front runner, having worked at the mine for 25 years and secured over 200 million in finances. New mining rules, higher royalties, local content requirements aim to boost Ghanaian revenue through though foreign governments warn of higher cost, the decision could set a precedent for African nations reclaiming natural resources. I will say this is in a trend of countries reclaiming their resources, as you've seen it in the AES with Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, more forcibly doing so during a contract, not even after a contract is over, to very much excitement within the country. But this is, I think, one of the first that you've seen with a democratically elected president doing the same. So we will see how it goes, but let's play this video and we'll have some commentary on the other side.
And Ghana is accelerating its push for resource nationalism. After nearly 3 decades, a foreign mining giant is out and local players are moving in. For 30 years, the Damang gold mine in western Ghana was run by South Africa-based Goldfields, but that era is now over. The Ghanaian government has reportedly rejected Goldfields' lease renewal, citing a failure to declare verifiable reserves. Instead, authorities seized the mine in April last year and are now vetting 3 local bidders to take over. Officials say this move is part of a broader push to increase local control over natural resources. The front runner to take over the mine is a firm called Engineers and Planners. It's led by Ghanaian billionaire MAHAMA. Now, MAHAMA's firm isn't new to Damang Mine. It has worked there for 25 years. Recently, the company secured more than $200 million in financing to support its operations. But reviving the mine won't be easy. Reports say returning Damang to full production will require $600 million to $1 billion in investment. That transition is powered by tougher mining rules. Now, Ghana has replaced its flat 5% royalty fee with a sliding scale of up to 12%. Miners are now required to buy local and hire local. These changes are a part of a bigger strategy. Ghana wants a larger share of its gold revenue.
All right, we will leave it there. So any thoughts on the nationalizing of this particular gold mine and a familiar name taking over? I don't know if there's any relation to the president.
He's the brother of the president. Yeah, Ibrahim
so.
MAHAMA is the president's brother. So I think that I think it's a great idea for the government trying to make sure that many of the gold mines end up having more local control. However, this particular story is about a South African mining company. They said 30 years, right?
Yep.
As of now, the majority of the mines, the gold mines in Ghana, are still foreign controlled, and many of the countries that are controlling are Australia, Canada, China, and the US. And it's interesting that this story is about a South African company, which is it's the only African one out of the ones I've just named. Like, if you think about it, Australia, Canada, China, US, and South Africa. And the South African one is the one that is being reclaimed. I'm just wondering if this will be done with the other countries when their leases come up as well, if that's something that they're going to do. I think that it will hold some weight if the country does it, as people's leases come up, so that it ends up becoming more local control. And I think it's a good idea that they were increasing. They said 5% for the is it a commission? They said up to 12% sliding scale.
Yep.
She said it would be good if that number was much higher, because I think that's one of the biggest challenges in a lot of African countries when it comes to natural resources, is that a lot of the countries are not making that much percentage-wise from their own natural resources. So if those numbers were higher, it might be more fair and balanced when it comes to foreign operations, because most countries around the world have foreign operations within them. Canada has a lot of US operations in the country. The US has a lot of Canada things that go there. Like, so many countries are trading with each other. They're working in each other's countries. So it's not unusual to see other countries working in another nation, but it's some fairness when it comes to percentages of profits and that kind of stuff could be done better, more in the favor of the hosting country.
Absolutely. And one thing I've seen in other countries is sometimes they will give favorable terms to local organizations and then have higher costs to international. And that, if you're not going to turn them over to bidding to locally, at the very least, that would be another solution, right? Because I think that that's really important to ensure that that there's an opportunity, like you said, to make more money off of those minerals and investments, because the original deals that have been done are just get renewed, right? And they're always done many times, and there's been so many conversations about this, that African countries have always been the easiest for other countries to negotiate with, because they never negotiate. Like, we all negotiate with each other at the market to buy a car, like all the way up the scale, except when it comes to international financing. It feels like there's no negotiation that happens there. It's just like, oh, you want to give us money? Yes, we'll take it. And so I do think that there needs to be more of that, right? And, you know, obviously the continent of Africa in this particular area with natural resources is actually where all of the leverage lies. And you see that the AES has realized that, and that's why they're taking the position that they're taking. Mali has been under US sanctions for I don't even know how many years, but is always on the fastest growing economies list because they've nationalized their gold mines and they've learned how to reinvest that funding back into their country. I think it's really important for people to learn from them and to apply it. And to your point, I hope that the same applies for other non-African mines. So there was a question here. Can you explain the $1 billion investment? So the reason, part of the reason that you heard in that story for taking back over the mine was not sufficient proof of, I guess, the viability. I can't remember what the words that they used were, but they have to get it back up and running. And that requires workers, equipment, all kinds of different things that are going to have to be brought in and utilized to do this. Now, because Ghana is a gold-rich country, if you guys aren't aware, prior to Kwame Nkrumah renaming the country, it was called the Gold Coast because of how much gold is underground. And so the expectation, if you're going to spend $1 billion, is that you'll make much more than that over the long term. And so, but that's what it's going to require. That's what they're saying. It's going to require that kind of investment to be able to determine the amount of gold reserves that are there and to be able to mine it out. It is a very costly endeavor, but it also can be a very profitable one if done properly, right? I mean, we've reported on the illegal gold mining that was happening in country. Many times they were blaming local Ghanaians, but you were finding that there were other foreign nationals that were part of these illegal mining situations in country. And so, you know, these are folks obviously doing it at a large scale here in this particular instance. And so we'll be interested to see how this goes. And then, of course, if this applies to other foreign nationals who have interest in Ghana's resources. Okay. On to the next story. And this is kind of a continuation of a story that we recently reported on. And that was specifically around the fact that, if you guys remember, there were some folks that were trading tomatoes, tomato traders from Ghana that had gone to Burkina Faso to buy these. And they happened to be victims of a terrorist attack that happened there. And so that was the first time I became aware of how dependent Ghana is on the imports from Burkina Faso in terms of tomatoes. And I know we'll talk about more about the history on the other side of this video. But what has been announced recently is Burkina Faso is planning to ban all tomato exports. I don't know how long that will be, but that is an announcement that was recently made. So we will play this video and we will have some commentary on the other side.
Tomato exports ban by the Burkinabe government is already telling on the racecourse market in Kumasi.
I have lost all my capital. We don't know what to do now.
In a letter signed by the Francophone government, it noted that the ban is necessary to feed the country's national processing units. It also suspended the issuance of the special export authorizations, cautioning operators holding valid fresh tomato export permits to complete their export procedures within 2 weeks.
2 weeks,
the ban is really disturbing to know. Ghana is going to be affected heavily. We have nowhere to source the tomatoes.
All right. So, Ivy, okay. I just want to make sure you were there. Your thoughts on this particular ban on tomatoes?
I mean, they're doing it to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They understanding is that they've decided to do this so that they can control any shortages on their side. That's my understanding. So they're not thinking about how it's going to affect Ghana. They're thinking about their own people and how they want to make sure they don't have any shortages in their processing at their factories. That's my understanding of it. And what it has done is it exposes the shortcomings that Ghana has. And as you said earlier, that Ghana is very dependent on the importing of tomatoes from Burkina Faso. And there's a lot of people, as we saw those traders, very upset. For people who can speak Tree, you know, they were talking about how it's going to take all their money to not be able to receive the imports coming from Burkina Faso. Now, for the history, it's like during the 1960s, Ghana was processing factories. They had under Kwame Nkrumah, the first president, were promoting the industrialization of tomatoes, with tomato factories that were thriving in Ghana. And my understanding is those factories were all closed down. Eventually, by the 80s, everything was shut down. And so the importation of tomatoes has become a huge part of Ghana's economy when it comes to people in the markets, depending on it coming in and then them reselling it. When we do have the ability to grow it here, but that's what this does, is it exposes the issue within the country. And so now when this ban is enforced, what's going to happen is we're going to start to see an increase in the cost of tomatoes. Whatever tomatoes people can get are going to be much more expensive. And then that's going to pass on down to the consumer. You're going to find people's food at restaurants is going to be more expensive because Ghanaians use tomatoes in a lot of dishes and a lot of stews, making tomato paste. And so we're going to see a rise in the cost of things across the board as a result. So it'll affect people for sure.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think tomatoes are used in granite soup, right?
Yes.
And that's the Sunday special,
and
if I remember correctly.
Light soup. Light
soup,
they use tomatoes in pretty much everything, in the stews that they make and everything too. So it's a major thing, major part of the diet.
Yeah. And to your point, this exposes that challenge of importing, right? You know, I was shocked when I lived on the continent how much is imported from everywhere, from neighboring countries, from Europe. They import chicken from Europe. Ghana does, Nigeria does.
Really? I thought their chicken came from South Africa and Ghana. I didn't know it was came from Europe.
Well, in different countries, let me say. And I noticed that even not always is it from one country. So, but yeah, I mean, sometimes you order from, I saw chicken from Europe. I saw, what else was it that I saw from Europe? Well, obviously chocolate, which is a whole nother thing. You know, but, you know, you find that a lot of what is consumed comes from other places. Obviously, there's enough skill and resources available to have it from within the country. I think it just requires some reworking of systems, training, etc., to really maximize the domestic use. As you can see, Burkina Faso is working on that on a number of different ways. With, you know, they bought a bunch of tractors. In fact, they bought hundreds of tractors from Ghana. If people might remember, there was that viral video of all those tractors leaving Ghana to go to Burkina Faso for all the farming, that Ibrahim Traore was, you know, putting money into farmers' pockets and helping farmers really begin to produce their own you know, crops, so that they depended less on external resources. And so I hope that this is seen as a way to begin to start that process again, to begin to do that again, so that there are more jobs in country, and the ability to you know, build new skills and help people take care of their families. Because I think in the end, although this is going to be very difficult for those market women in the short term, and I can't even imagine what that means for them to be able to feed their families today, I hope that in the long term, this puts everyone in a position to better be self-sufficient country, and ensure that these that they bring back some of these practices like farming and also refining and processing of these raw goods in country. Okay, with that, we'll move on to the last story. And this story is from Jocelyn Dumas, who mentions that she had gone through a scamming scare with mobile money. And so I think maybe I should take some time to explain mobile money to people before you watch this video, because it may not be clear what she's talking about if many of you aren't aware. So, in the US, I think, or in the UK or in Canada, many of you guys might be familiar with things like Cash App or Zelle or, what was the other one? Cash App, Zelle. There's a few other payment platforms like this. There are many people around the continent who utilize their mobile carrier as a bank, meaning they store money with their mobile carrier, and the mobile carriers, mostly within one country, generally make it easy to send money from that same mobile carrier to someone else within that same network, and even many times across mobile networks. So, for example, what you can do is you can go to one of those stands, you give them cash, you get a text message that says this amount is in your mobile money account, your mobile money wallet. And it's basically money that is stored through your mobile carrier, your mobile phone carrier. So imagine if Verizon, if you're in the US, Verizon or AT&T had an option for you to store cash within there, and you could send money through AT&T to another AT&T customer. Many of these market women, that is how they send money back and forth, especially if people aren't walking around with cash. I know for me, I forget to walk around with cash a lot, and I use MOMO to pay Uber drivers, to pay different people for different things. So I do think it's important to understand kind of the function of mobile money and how often people use it for different things. Like in this case, she was using it to pay for DSTV. And so just know that people use it for all kinds of things, to pay your bills. People pay their electricity bills with mobile money. In fact, I pay my electricity bills with mobile money. In fact, that's how I remit money to the country, is I usually send money to myself on my own mobile money wallet, whether that's in Ghana or in Sierra Leone, because I have mobile money in both countries. And then I use that to remit money to family members locally in country through the mobile money wallets. So just wanted to give that little background on mobile money, so that when you hear this story, maybe it'll make a little bit more sense to you, for those of you who are unfamiliar with how mobile money works. I don't know if I'm missing anything. I'm sure I missed something. Is there anything that you want to add on mobile money so people understand it before we watch this video?
I mean, it could have just been said that it's simply a digital app that people have on their phone, and you actually attach. It's a digital app you have on your phone that's like a wallet attached to your phone. The way that somebody would think of Apple Wallet or their Google Pay wallet, or their Venmo, and you mentioned Zelle, you mentioned Cash App. It's a way to have money coming to your phone like it's a wallet, a digital wallet attached to your phone, and it's attached to your phone number. And so that's how you send from person to person. It's attached to their phone number, and you can, as he said, pay your bills, all kinds of different things using mobile money. A lot of people won't carry cash. They'll go to restaurants, they'll pay for things using mobile money to make their payments. And then you said you send money to yourself using an app to send money to yourself. I mean, that's an example of sending money. And there's a lot of people taking advantage. There's scammers out there. And so this story of Jocelyn Dumas, she is actually one of the biggest celebrities in Ghana. She's an actress in movies and television, and she used to host a TV show. And she is somebody who this has happened to, getting scammed and money drained out of her mobile wallet. And so here's the video that he's going to show.
All right. So here we go.
Hey guys, let me tell you guys how I was scammed, and my MTN MOMO wallet was literally emptied. So I called DSTV, and DSTV, you guys need to check this thing. I called DSTV thinking that I was speaking to a representative to upgrade my package. Now, this person was really polite, he was really kind, he was really helpful, he was patient with me. And he now, basically what he said to me was I should key in my, he sent me a link that I should key in my decoder number and add my PIN number. So I asked him, I said, but why? He said, oh, the system is down here. So the only way they can actually rectify how I paid and how much I paid and how much is left for me to top up for the upgrade is by me entering my PIN. But I'm the one doing it, right? He sent me the link. So he sent me the link, I did it. And then he forwarded me another link and he was like, Madam, please, we only have 15 seconds. We have like barely 15-20 seconds because the system is down. But I'm going to send you another link and there's a number. Please mention the number back to me. But when you're mentioning the number back to me, key in the decoder number just like the way you keyed it in with the first link I sent you. And I was like, again, because he says we have only 15 minutes, I didn't even have enough time to process. So I keyed in the entire thing, including my PIN number, and I sent it back to him. And then I gave him the number that he had generated as well through the second link he sent me. So by that time, he was now talking to me, making small talks and stuff like that. He was even telling me to put the channel on different channels and stuff. And then he says, oh, madam, this number you're talking to me on, is it your MOMO number or is Airtel? And I said, oh, no, it's MOMO because I ported. And this is the number I would usually use to pay my DSTV because I really pay like ahead, like 6 months or a year ahead. As soon as I said to him that is my number, I felt a vibration on my phone. All my money was emptied in the account. Hey. And in the process of him talking to me as well, because he now had my PIN, because I willingly gave it to him. Can you imagine? Because he now has my PIN and my number, he was able to get into my MTN MOMO app. And then he signed me on for something called Extra Pay or something like that. So what happens is if you are sending somebody MOMO and you don't have enough money, MTN will still offset it. And then when you're able to sort of pay MOMO back into your account, into your wallet, MTN will deduct the money. So even after everything they did to me and emptied my account, when I rectified everything with MTN and then they restored my mobile money for me and my wallet for me and everything else, I went in to pay some money in so I can do my transactions. And that money, the second money they tried to take out, hey guys.
Wow. Lots of lessons to learn there. I'm just shaking my head because I was like, man, so many red flags. Maybe I'll take this one first, and then I'll let you.
I mean, I have lots of stories too. So,
okay. So I will say this because I know that you probably have more to share than I do, but a couple of red flags there. Number one, with any, well, let's take a step back. Number one, it can happen to anybody. There are a lot of people who complain who come to the continent that feel like Americans are getting scammed, right? That's the conversation. We saw that comment a little earlier. Right. So one of the things that that I heard there, first of all, is that she pays DSTV months in advance. She has cash apparently. So, but generally, right, people don't store a lot of money, but I know some people who store up to 10,000 Ghana cedis in their mobile money wallet. Some people even store more than that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so what she mentioned is what could be considered like an overdraft. Sometimes you'll get a message from, and in this case, Telecel in Ghana is where I got the message from that says, you don't have the cash, or don't have the MOMO, you can still pay it. And then, whatever, it's like an overdraft. And so that's what she's expressing is like they had signed her up for like an overdraft. A few things to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, when doing anything, anywhere, regardless of if it's a bank, if it's a mobile phone carrier, if it's anything else, two things scammers do. One is they use a sense of urgency. You have to do this right now. We don't have much time. I promise you, no company that needs something from you ever is going to rush you. In fact, it takes longer than you want it to. Think about when you're on the phone with your bank or when you're on the phone with the phone company. You're like, when is this going to be over? They read you thousands of disclaimers and tell you all these different things. They'll also tell you that you should never share your PIN number with anybody else. That is something they always tell you. Those companies try to warn you as much as possible. So just keep that in mind. If someone tells you, we need to do this, madam, quickly, fast, we need to do this now. That's number one red flag. Number two red flag is no company is going to, very rarely, I should say, because she said she called them. So that's a fair mistake to make, because she said she thought she was calling MTN. I don't know how she got the number, where she got the number from, but in her story, she said she called them. Generally, they don't ask you for your PIN number. If anyone asks you for your PIN number or anything like that, I almost always say, let me walk into a local store to deal with this in person, because now you're starting to ask for stuff I don't ever give. That's the secondary thing, is the speed. Two, for personal data that usually representatives are not supposed to ask you for. They're usually very limited in their capabilities, right? They do this or that on their computer to do something. You know, you just think about it. Just try to think about how frustrating it can be to be on the phone with these people. And if you haven't done it before, I can tell you, I've spent hours on the phone with Telecel, formerly Vodafone. Hours setting up my MiFi, my Wi-Fi, all the things. So, and it takes a while, even at a local location. So if anybody calls you with that kind of speed up time frame, it needs to be done quickly, that's a red flag. If they ask you for your PIN number, that's a red flag. And also the other thing I think to keep in mind too is when you are dealing with your whatever company it is that you're paying for whatever it is through, generally they ask you for some verifying details first. And some of those details that they ask you will be details that you know that you've already shared with that particular company. And anytime you get asked something that you know you haven't shared before, that should also be something to think about. That's a little bit more rare, but I think it's important to take that into consideration because that is a possibility. But in terms of people getting scammed from MOMO, I've heard it so many times. My caretaker, my housekeeper, when I was in Ghana, it happened to her. One time, somebody sent me to my MTN number. Somebody sent me 300 Ghana CDs. I sent it back because I'm an honest person, and they were so thankful. You know, but like, you know, it happens sometimes. People press the wrong number, send it to the wrong person. But just think about those things. Those are the two high level things that I would say. I don't have really many stories about MOMO scamming except for the one. But I'm sure you have some stories. So please, Ivy, over to you.
First of all, I agree that you should never give your PIN. And as a matter of fact, right now, MTN in Ghana has been sending messages to people who use the platform to let you know, don't give this information. We never asked for this information. Report if this ever happens. When you use the MyMomo app, I've noticed over the last couple of months, I've been getting those kind of pop-ups from them, just reminding people not to allow themselves to get taken advantage of. And I want to quickly say that the reason why we thought this story was important is because, just like you were saying, we want to make sure that the diaspora understands that you're not the only ones who are experiencing getting scammed, because there's this misconception that only the diaspora are getting scammed. They're like, I'm coming to Ghana and I'm getting scammed. Like they're the only ones who've had these bad experiences. But unfortunately, a lot of local people have these bad experiences as well. Things to watch out for in case you are in Ghana already, or if you're moving to Ghana and you get these things happening and you're not familiar. One of the things that people are doing is they call you, as he said, and they pretend that they've sent money to you by mistake. They tell you to send the money back. What I've noticed is they will send you a fake text message that doesn't come from MTN. They'll send a fake text message that says you've been sent money, you need to reverse it. And when you look at it, you can, oftentimes it's badly written, it's got poor grammar, lacks capitalization of names, those kinds of details. When you look at it, you can tell it's not. And when it's coming from MTN, MTN actually shows MTN on your phone, whereas this one will be coming from someone's personal number with no other information. Watch out for those. We have people who are now calling you and making claims like there's a delivery coming to you. a combination of WhatsApp scams and the MTN MOMO scam, claiming that they're DHL, they want to do a delivery, they need your PIN code in order to complete the delivery. And when they're asking for your PIN code, that should be an immediate red flag, because they just want that to be able to get into your MOMO wallet to try to take all of the money. I had somebody call me and claim they were calling from the head office, said that there is a problem with my MOMO wallet and that it's going to be locked because there's some issues they found with it. They wanted me to dial *1 something something, and some code they wanted me to dial. They said, if you dial this code, it'll help us repair your mobile money wallet. And then I said, okay, if there's a problem with my mobile money wallet, I will go to the head office and go and speak to somebody and see what the issue is. And she was like, no, you have to do it right now. If you don't do it right now, we're not going to be able to fix it. And I said, well, if there's a serious problem, I will go to the head office, you know? So those kinds of things, if you're not sure, always just say you're going to go to the office and go and speak to someone in person to find out what the issue is. But it is a huge, huge problem that can happen to anyone, as we've said. And so just be careful with it, because it is a way that people try to use to drain out whatever money you have. And once they drain it out, it is really hard to get it back. It is really hard to recover that money. What they do too is what I've heard from somebody is that there are some MOMO vendors who are selling the lists of people's names and their phone numbers and then randomly doing cold calls. Just be careful. Just be extra vigilant. That's it.
Yes. Be skeptical. Right. That's the main rule of thumb when it comes to these things. And it happens literally to people of all ages across all different forms, right? So, but it was interesting to see that from her, considering obviously she lives in country, she's used to spending MOMO all the time,
and a high-profile person
as well, yeah. And you saw how easy it was for her to get got. So, just make sure you take those things into consideration, because no matter where you are in the world, there are scammers.
Yes.
All right, so that concludes the stories for today. Any final words before we go, Ivy?
No, just make sure that you're always paying attention to the news that's happening in the country that you are considering living in, or that you are living in, because if you are looking to make investments in the country, do business in the country, work and live in the country, understanding the lay of the land and understanding business, understanding what decisions the government is making is very important with your decisions that you also make. So paying attention to some of the stories, like what we cover, is very key to your success as well.
Absolutely. And then I'll also say too, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to both channels, right? So Ivy Prosper, her name is there on screen. You can search for Ivy Prosper across all platforms. For me, my platform is called Authentic African. So just search for Authentic African across all platforms. Make sure you follow and subscribe to both channels. If you're watching from either side, go over to the other and follow. And then also share this with anybody you know who's thinking about moving, visiting, investing in Ghana. This will be really helpful for them to get a little bit of an understanding of what's happening on the ground in real time. And with that, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys all in 2 weeks. Bye, guys.
Bye.